No one could handle the billionaire's daughter, until a black cleaning lady did what no one else dared to try. She saw her. High above the Chicago streets, where the city's pulse beats through glass towers and mirrored windows, Ellison Global stood like a monument to power. A place where billion-dollar deals were born and mistakes had no place. Anthony Ellison ruled the top floor. Sharp suit, sharper instincts. He didn't just lead industries, he commanded them. But 3 floors down, far from the polished boardrooms and power lunches, a 6-year-old girl wandered the hallways like a ghost. Her name was Anna. She was the daughter of the man who built empires. And the girl no one knew how to hold. Teachers quit. Nannies fled. Therapists nodded and took notes, only to walk away defeated. She screamed. She shut down. And when her mother died, something inside her never came back. Most days, the staff avoided her completely. She was cold, distant, dangerous, they said, not with fists or words, but with silence that could crack a person open. And then, one morning, something strange happened. A woman pushed open the break room door with a mop bucket and tired eyes. No one looked twice. Just the cleaning lady, here before dawn and gone before lunch. Her name was Elizabeth Johnson, 32, quiet, tired, but not defeated, the kind of woman who spoke only when it mattered and felt more than she said. That day the break room was empty, except for Anna. Curled beneath the table, her knees hugged to her chest, silent tears trailing down her cheeks. Elizabeth paused. She didn't speak. She didn't flinch. She simply sat down on the floor beside her, quietly, like she'd been waiting her whole life for that moment. She didn't ask what was wrong. She didn't try to fix her. She just stayed. And for the first time in weeks, Anna didn't scream. She didn't run. She just breathed. No one saw it happen. No one, except the security cameras. And the man upstairs who'd spent his fortune building walls, now stood watching someone gently begin to break one down. But before we begin, click subscribe, like this video, and tell us where in the world you're watching from. I hope this story reminds you that kindness doesn't wear a title. It comes from the heart. The morning sun hit the windows like fire, casting long streaks of gold across the lobby of Ellison Global. Everything gleamed, marble floors, polished glass, lives curated to perfection. Anthony Ellison stepped out of the elevator like he belonged to another world. He moved fast, never smiled, always 3 steps ahead of time. Every employee knew his rules. Show up early, speak with purpose, and don't bring emotion through the front door. But behind him, dragging her small feet across the tiles, was his daughter, Anna, 6 years old, eyes too tired for her age. She didn't speak to anyone, didn't look up, didn't cry. Not anymore. Her mother's death had quieted her in a way no therapist could name, and whatever was left inside her came out in tantrums, long silences, and stares that scared grown men. She had been expelled from 2 elite schools in 8 months, rejected 5 nannies in half that time. No one could reach her. No one even wanted to try. By noon, most of the office pretended she wasn't there. Staff ducked around corners. Assistants whispered. And the child of Chicago's most powerful man sat alone in a corner, small, invisible, forgotten. Until a quiet sound broke the silence. The slow, steady squeak of a mop bucket rolling down the hall. Elizabeth Johnson pushed open the break room door like she always did, unnoticed, unseen. She was used to being invisible. But this time, she stopped. Beneath the long table, a pair of small legs. A soft sound, a hiccup, maybe a sob. Anna. Elizabeth said nothing. She simply lowered herself to the floor, back against the wall, palms resting in her lap, and she waited, not to fix, not to advise, just to be there. Anna didn't move, but her breathing slowed, and in that quiet a moment passed between them, not loud, not dramatic, just enough to shift something, enough to start. Elizabeth Johnson didn't belong in glass towers, not by title, not by pay grade, and certainly not by the way people looked through her like she wasn't even there. She arrived before sunrise, wore the same faded uniform, kept her hair tied back, spoke only when spoken to. To most, she was just the cleaning lady, but not to Anna, not anymore. Elizabeth had learned long ago that silence was its own kind of strength. She'd once taught preschool on the south side, until the accident, a fire, a brother lost, and a life that fractured somewhere between grief and survival. After that, she couldn't step back into a classroom, so she found a quieter way to be close to people, a quieter way to matter. At Ellison Global, no one asked her why she walked with a slight limp. No one wondered what she listened to in those old headphones she wore at lunch. No one noticed that she always carried peppermints in her pocket, a habit she picked up from her brother, who believed sweets made hard days softer. Anna noticed. One afternoon, the girl trailed her down the hall without a word, not toward her father, not toward her nanny, toward the janitor's closet. Elizabeth didn't turn around. She just opened the door, flicked on the light, and stepped aside. Anna followed, sat quietly on an overturned bucket. A beat of silence. Then, the soft crinkle of a peppermint wrapper. A small open
"No,
hand.
thank you."
No
Anna
smile.
took it.
But she didn't leave. That was enough. That night, the break room camera caught something strange. A second peppermint missing from Elizabeth's pocket, and Anna in the corner, turning it slowly in her hands like it was made of gold. And for the first time in weeks, she didn't ask for her tablet, or her nanny, or even her father. She just asked quietly, "Will she be here tomorrow?" It started small. One morning, Anna refused to enter the elevator without Elizabeth. She didn't cry, didn't throw a tantrum, just stood there, silent, waiting. Another day, she left her nanny mid-sentence and followed Elizabeth down the hallway, past glass walls and stunned stares. No one said a word, but everyone noticed. By the end of the week, Anna had stopped waiting in her father's office. She waited by the janitor's closet instead. She didn't ask for toys, didn't demand attention. She just wanted to be where the quiet was, where she wasn't being fixed or watched or explained. With Elizabeth, she wasn't a case to be managed. She was just a little girl with tangled hair and too many feelings. And Elizabeth never asked her to be anything else. One afternoon after the lunch rush cleared out, Elizabeth walked into the break room and stopped. On the table, a single sheet of paper, a crayon drawing, two stick figures holding hands, one tall, one small, both smiling. In red letters, shaky but careful, Anna. Elizabeth didn't say a word. She folded the paper gently and tucked it into her bag. Upstairs, in his private office, Anthony Ellison sat at his desk, reviewing quarterly projections, when his phone buzzed, a security alert. He opened the footage, paused. There, in the break room, was his daughter. Her head rested in Elizabeth's lap, eyes closed, breathing steady, and the cleaning lady just sat there, still, present. Hands resting over the girl's back with a kind of calm no amount of money could teach. He didn't know what it meant, didn't know how it happened, but for the first time in months, his daughter looked safe, not entertained, not managed, safe. He closed the laptop slowly, unsure of what to feel, and even more unsure of who this woman was, and how, in silence, she'd done what no one else could. He didn't call her into his office right away. Anthony Ellison wasn't impulsive. He liked control, of numbers, outcomes. But what he saw on that security footage, it stayed with him. That night he didn't sleep. He kept seeing his daughter, peaceful still, in the arms of a woman he'd passed in the hall 100 times, and never once looked at. The next morning, he waited, watched the hallway clock tick past 10, then pressed the intercom. "Have Elizabeth Johnson sent to my office." A pause, then the response. "The cleaning staff." He didn't answer. Moments later, she stepped inside, still in uniform, still quiet, hands folded in front of her, eyes steady. She didn't look afraid, just tired. In that way people are when they've lived through too much to be shaken by a title. He gestured to the seat. She didn't take it. He studied her for a moment. The silence stretched. Then finally, "What did you say to my daughter?" Elizabeth tilted her head slightly, thought for a moment, then said simply, "Nothing." Anthony blinked. "Nothing?" She nodded. "I just listened." There was no defense in her voice, no performance, just truth. He leaned back slowly, the weight of her answer settling like dust across the room. He didn't understand it, but part of him, a part long buried beneath market shares and mergers, believed her. He looked down at his desk. "She's been shutting everyone out," he said quietly, "and I don't know how to reach her anymore." Elizabeth didn't offer comfort, didn't rush to fill the silence. She just said, "She's grieving. Most people try to talk over that. I don't." Another silence. Then, for the first time, he looked at her with something close to respect. And when she turned to leave, he didn't stop her. He just watched the door closed and wondered how a woman with no degree, no title and no answers had seen his daughter more clearly than he ever had. Anthony planned the party like he planned everything else, with precision, scale and the finest money could buy. A grand hotel ballroom, magicians, sculpted ice, imported flowers in shades of blush and white. A 4-tier cake that cost more than some people's rent. It was everything he thought a little girl should want. But the day before, as he showed Anna the final seating chart, she looked up from the corner of the couch and asked softly, "Can Elizabeth come?" He froze. The question caught him off guard, not because she asked it, but because it was the first thing she'd asked for. In months. The next day, the ballroom shimmered. Guests arrived in pressed suits and pastel dresses. A string quartet played softly behind clinking glasses. But Anna, in a pale blue dress with a bow she refused to tie, stood at the edge of the room watching the door. She didn't run to the magicians, didn't look at the cake, didn't smile. Not until Elizabeth walked in, no fancy dress, no announcement, just her, in a simple blouse and clean sneakers, holding a small box wrapped in recycled paper. Anna ran to her, wrapped her arms around her waist without a word, then tugged her gently toward the cake table. The room hushed as the candles were lit. But Anna didn't move, didn't lean forward. She looked up at Elizabeth and whispered, "Come with me." Elizabeth stepped beside her, placed a gentle hand on her back, and only then did Anna close her eyes, make a wish, and blow out the candles. A moment passed, then another, until a small voice floated through the hush. "You feel like Mama." No one spoke. No one moved. Across the room, Anthony turned away, eyes wet, jaw clenched. He didn't know what she wished for, but he knew somehow it had already come true. And that night, long after the last guest had gone, he cancelled his dinner meeting and sat beside his daughter on the floor just to listen to her breathe. After the birthday, something changed. Not loudly, not all at once, but enough to make people look twice. Anna started showing up early, not to her father's office, not to the nanny's side, to the janitor's room. She'd sit on a crate beside Elizabeth, watching her fold towels, sweep corners, wipe down counters. Sometimes she helped. Other times, she just sat, peppermint in hand, humming to herself. Staff whispered, of course, not unkindly, just confused. The billionaire's daughter, folding rags in the supply closet. It didn't make sense. And yet, it did. Anthony watched it happen from a distance. At first, he told himself it was just a phase, a child clinging to routine. Something simple. But then came the drawings. One day he found a crayon sketch on his desk. A woman with gentle eyes holding hands with a small girl. They were laughing. He asked his assistant where it came from. She said, "Anna left it for you." And when he looked closer, he noticed the woman wasn't his late wife. It was Elizabeth. He didn't know what to feel, only that it was honest. So he stopped trying to define it, started showing up in the break room more often, not with purpose, just to be there. He'd sit near them during lunch, watching Anna giggle as Elizabeth taught her how to sweep in circles, not lines. He noticed the way she greeted the security guards now, by name. The way she said please without being reminded. The way she laughed, real, full, like she wasn't carrying the world on her shoulders anymore. And maybe, Anthony thought, she wasn't. Not alone, at least. One afternoon, as Elizabeth reached for a mop bucket, he said her name, her first name, out loud for the very first time. "Elizabeth!" She looked up, surprised. He paused, then offered the smallest nod, a quiet acknowledgement of something he didn't have the language for. She didn't respond with words, just smiled and went back to cleaning, as if healing a family had somehow become part of the job. It was a Tuesday, same routine, same hallway, same time. Anna waited by the janitor's closet, holding a peppermint in her hand, the red one she always saved for Elizabeth. But the door stayed closed. 10 minutes passed, then 20. No footsteps, no gentle hum from down the hall, no warm eyes meeting hers with a quiet smile. By noon, Anna was pacing. By 1, she was crying. By 2, she'd locked herself in the supply room, wouldn't speak, wouldn't eat. Anthony was in a board meeting when the call came through. "Your daughter's having a meltdown, we can't calm her down." He left without a word. By the time he reached the office, Anna was curled beneath the table, just like the first time Elizabeth had found her, tears soaking into her sleeves. He knelt beside her. "Sweetheart, and what's wrong?" Her voice cracked. "She's gone." He didn't understand, not fully, but his chest tightened anyway. Back upstairs, he called HR, asked if Elizabeth had called in sick. Silence. Then a quiet reply. "She collapsed on the subway this morning. Paramedics took her to County General." His next move was automatic. Phone to ear, private doctor, black car waiting at the curb. By evening, he stood at the edge of a hospital bed, watching the woman who'd held his daughter with more tenderness than he ever could. IV lines, monitors, shallow breaths. She looked smaller here, fragile. Her bag sat on the chair beside her, worn canvas, faded straps. It fell open when he picked it up. Inside, a photograph, a young boy, big smile, missing front tooth, taped along the edge, a burnt corner, smoke damage. Old. He stared at it for a long time. Didn't speak, didn't need to, because in that moment, he finally understood. She hadn't just seen his daughter's grief, she'd recognized it, and for the first time in years, Anthony sat in silence beside someone's hospital bed, not as a CEO, not as a man in control, but as a father, waiting. Elizabeth returned to work 2 weeks later, a little thinner, moving slower, but still her. The elevator doors opened, and for a moment the office held its breath. Even the lobby felt quieter, as if it had missed her too. She didn't expect anything, not flowers, not applause, just picked up her mop handle and headed for the break room. Same rhythm, same silence. But when she opened the door, she stopped. The walls were no longer grey. They were yellow, soft, golden, glowing, like morning sunlight on good days. The kind of yellow that makes children smile without knowing why. Painted across one wall was a mural, stick figures holding hands, laughter sketched in crayon swirls. A woman and a little girl, surrounded by peppermint shapes and floating hearts. At the bottom, in messy block letters, "Sometimes the quietest people carry the loudest love." Elizabeth stared for a long time, one hand resting on the doorframe, the other pressed gently to her chest. Behind her, small footsteps. Anna slipped beside her, holding a paintbrush streaked with gold. "I told Daddy yellow makes people happy," she whispered. He said okay. Elizabeth knelt slowly, not because she had to, but because her knees felt soft with something she hadn't let herself feel in years. Tears, not loud ones, just enough to blur the lines of the mural. She pulled Anna close, held her there, and in that moment, no one spoke. Because some thank yous don't come in words. They come in colors, in walls repainted, in hands held by people who see your scars and don't flinch. Across the hall, Anthony watched from his office doorway, tie loosened, eyes tired. But this time they weren't scanning spreadsheets. They were focused on a woman kneeling beside his daughter, wrapped in something deeper than gratitude. something he still didn't know how to name. But as he turned back into his office, he paused and looked around at the glass, the numbers, the empire he'd built, and for the first time wondered if any of it mattered more than a yellow wall. Months passed. The tower didn't change much. Still glass, still sharp lines, still a skyline reflection of wealth and ambition. But inside, things were softer. Anna was back in school. Not perfect, still quiet, still processing. But now she laughed during lunch, colored outside the lines. Told her teacher, "My favorite color is yellow. It feels like
Every
home."
morning she stopped at the front desk to leave a peppermint for the receptionist. Every afternoon she asked, "Is Elizabeth still here?" And most days, the answer was yes. But now, she didn't wear a uniform, didn't carry a mop. Her badge read, Family Wellness Coordinator, office on the 3rd floor, window facing east. She still walked the halls, still listened more than she spoke, still knelt to tie a child's shoelace or refill the candy jar by the elevators. But now, people saw her. Anthony had created the role himself, a position with full benefits, a blank page for her to write whatever care looked like. The board asked why. He answered with a photo. Anna, asleep in Elizabeth's lap, arms wrapped around her waist like an anchor, then said, "You can't teach love with money. You learn it from people like her." No one questioned him after that. On Friday afternoons, they sometimes gathered in the break room, Elizabeth, Anna, and Anthony. No phones, no agendas, just 3 people sharing soup in silence. And on one of those afternoons, Anna dozed off with her head on Elizabeth's lap, just like before. Anthony stood in the doorway again, but this time he didn't freeze. He smiled, stepped inside, took the chair beside them, and sat in the quiet he used to run from. Not as a CEO, not as a man who built an empire, just as a father. Finally learning how to stay. Because in a world obsessed with titles and towers, sometimes the most powerful legacy is a woman in worn-out sneakers who simply chose to sit and stay.